Your brain is having a conversation right now. Not with you, with a machine you never agreed to meet. What if someone could read your attention, your emotions, your intentions, without ever touching you? Right now, in airports, shopping malls, stadiums, and street corners across at least 17 countries, a new generation of sensors is watching you differently. They're not just recording your face or tracking your phone. They're measuring how your body responds to what you see, monitoring patterns invisible to your own awareness, building profiles of your mental state without consent. This isn't science fiction debuting in 2045. The technology already exists, it's already deployed, and most people being scanned have no idea it's happening. The companies behind it call it emotion AI and behavioral analytics. Privacy researchers call it something else. The final frontier of surveillance. The story begins quietly in 2019, when a Chinese tech firm called SenseTime installed prototype gait recognition systems in Beijing subway stations. The cameras didn't just identify faces. They analyzed walking patterns, measuring stride length, shoulder movement, even the subtle rhythm of how someone shifted their weight. Within 18 months, the technology evolved. By late 2020, researchers at Stanford University published a paper demonstrating that AI could detect emotional states by analyzing microexpressions lasting less than 1/5 of a second, changes too quick for human observers to consciously notice. The accuracy rate was 73%, far higher than most people achieve when trying to read emotions deliberately. Then came the corporate adoption wave. In February 2022, a British retail analytics company called WiseEye deployed attention tracking systems in over 400 stores across Europe. Ceiling-mounted sensors used thermal imaging and eye movement analysis to measure which products triggered pupil dilation, how long shoppers hesitated, even detecting microfrowns of confusion or doubt. The United States entered the picture through a different door. Between 2021 and 2023, the Transportation Security Administration tested behavioral screening kiosks at 6 major airports. Travelers answering routine questions, face sensors measuring vocal stress, facial temperature changes, and eye movement patterns. The system flagged individuals for additional screening based on physiological responses, not actions or words. Could you control your pupil dilation if you tried? By early 2024, the technology had miniaturized. Companies began selling audience engagement analytics systems small enough to mount above a laptop screen. Marketing firms, HR departments, and online education platforms adopted them to measure attention and emotional response during video calls, often embedding the monitoring in software terms of service agreements that users rarely read. The most controversial deployment came to light in September 2024. Investigative journalists at Der Spiegel uncovered that a German auto manufacturer had been using emotion detection systems to monitor assembly line workers, flagging employees who showed stress patterns or attention lapses for performance reviews. The workers had never been informed. The company claimed it was a safety measure. The core technology rests on 3 documented scientific foundations. First, pupillometry, the measurement of pupil size changes in response to cognitive load and emotional arousal, a phenomenon confirmed across hundreds of peer-reviewed studies since the 1960s. When you concentrate or feel surprised, your pupils dilate by measurable amounts, typically 1 to 2 millimeters, detectable by modern cameras from 15 feet away. Second, thermal facial imaging. Research from the University of Granada demonstrated that specific emotions create distinct heat patterns on human faces. Anxiety raises temperature around the eyes. Concentration cools the nose tip. Fear creates thermal signatures near the temporal arteries. These patterns occur involuntarily, governed by autonomic nervous system responses humans cannot consciously control. Third, gait and posture analysis powered by machine learning. A 2023 study at Carnegie Mellon showed AI systems could predict emotional states from body language with 68% accuracy after analyzing just 3 seconds of walking footage. The deployment evidence comes from multiple independent sources. Patent filings reveal the scale of development. Over 200 patents for non-contact emotion sensing and passive behavioral monitoring were filed between 2020 and 2024 by companies including Amazon, Microsoft, and several Chinese surveillance firms. Procurement records obtained through Freedom of Information requests show government adoption. The UK Home Office spent £4.2 million on behavioral analytics systems for use in public spaces between 2022 and 2024. Australian Border Security purchased similar systems worth $2.7 million Australian dollars for airport deployment. The most revealing evidence comes from the marketing materials themselves. Internal sales documents from a Silicon Valley firm, leaked to The Intercept in August 2024, promise clients they could measure consumer desire before conscious awareness and identify hesitation invisible to traditional observation. The documents included case studies claiming the technology helped retailers increase impulse purchases by 18% by identifying and targeting emotionally vulnerable moments. Proponents argue this technology serves legitimate purposes. Industry representatives point to potential safety applications: detecting distracted drivers, identifying medical patients in cognitive distress, or spotting security threats before they escalate. They emphasize that many systems analyze patterns, not individual identities, and claim the data is aggregated and anonymized. Technology ethicists dispute these reassurances. Dr. Kate Crawford of the AI Now Institute argues that aggregated data still reveals group-level patterns that can be used to manipulate vulnerable populations, and that anonymization breaks down when combined with other data sources. She notes that emotional states are among the most intimate forms of personal information, traditionally protected by medical privacy standards that these commercial systems bypass entirely. The largest gap remains public awareness. Surveys conducted in 6 countries found that between 71% and 84% of respondents had no knowledge such monitoring existed in public spaces they frequented. Even among those aware of the technology's existence, only 12% could correctly identify locations where it was deployed. Regulatory frameworks haven't caught up. The European Union's AI Act, which took effect in stages through 2024, classifies emotion recognition in certain contexts as high risk, but doesn't ban it outright. The United States has no federal law specifically governing this technology. Some individual states, including Illinois and California, have biometric privacy laws that might apply, but enforcement remains untested in court. For the individuals being monitored, the harm operates on multiple levels. Workers subjected to emotion monitoring report increased anxiety and constant self-consciousness. Knowing their stress itself might trigger negative evaluations. Several described adjusting their natural expressions and movements, creating a form of emotional labor that extends to their facial muscles and walking patterns. The technology also enables new forms of discrimination. Research demonstrates that emotion recognition systems show significantly lower accuracy for women, people of color, and elderly individuals, with error rates up to 20% higher than for young white males. These biases mean members of already marginalized groups face higher rates of false flags in security contexts and misread responses in commercial settings. Perhaps most troubling is the psychological impact of discovering you've been monitored without knowledge or consent. Privacy advocates describe a phenomenon they call retrospective violation, the distress of learning that intimate aspects of your internal state were measured and analyzed during moments you believed were private. One person described it as finding out someone had been reading your diary for years, except the diary was your own face. To understand what makes this technology different, consider a simple metaphor. Traditional surveillance is like someone following you and writing down where you go. This new generation is like someone following you and writing down what you're thinking about at each location, how you feel about what you see, and what you're likely to do next, all before you've consciously made those decisions yourself. The technology exposes what neuroscientist Dr. Antonio Damasio calls the preconscious substrate of human behavior. Your brain makes micro-decisions and generates emotional responses milliseconds before you become aware of them. For most of human history, that private neurological space remained inaccessible to outside observers. These systems changed that fundamental boundary. Legal scholar Woodrow Hartzog frames it as the difference between monitoring behavior and monitoring capacity. We've accepted cameras that record what we do, he explains. But these systems record what we might do, what we're inclined toward, what we're vulnerable to. They surveil potential, not just action. The commercial implications extend beyond individual privacy. When companies can measure and exploit preconscious responses, the entire notion of consumer choice becomes questionable. Behavioral economist Cass Sunstein warns that combining real-time emotion sensing with personalized digital environments creates what he calls perfect nudging, where individuals can be guided toward decisions that serve corporate interests while believing they're exercising free will. Here's where we stand. The technology exists, it's accurate enough to be commercially viable, and it's already deployed in numerous public and private spaces. What we don't know is the full scale of deployment, how the collected data is being stored and used long-term, or whether effective regulation can emerge before the monitoring becomes ubiquitous and normalized. The question isn't whether this technology will spread. It already has. The question is whether societies will impose meaningful limits before the psychological and social costs become irreversible. Near-term scenarios unfold along several paths. First, regulatory response. The European Union will likely strengthen restrictions on emotion AI in public spaces within the next 18 months, following patterns from facial recognition debates. Other democracies may follow, though implementation timelines remain uncertain. Second, corporate self-regulation efforts. Major tech companies, facing public pressure, may establish voluntary standards for disclosure and consent, similar to cookie notices and privacy policies. However, past patterns suggest such measures often prioritize legal protection over meaningful transparency. Third, technological countermeasures. Researchers are already developing adversarial glasses, clothing patterns, and makeup design to confuse emotion recognition systems. These tools may become commercially available within 2 years, though widespread adoption remains unlikely. Would you wear technology-blocking glasses every day if you had to? Fourth, normalization and acceptance. Historical patterns suggest that surveillance technologies, once deployed, rarely get rolled back. Public concern may fade as the monitoring becomes invisible routine, much has happened with CCTV cameras and location tracking. The wild card remains litigation. The first major court case challenging non-consensual emotion monitoring in employment or public spaces could establish precedents that either legitimize or constrain the technology. Several cases are working through lower courts as of October 2024. Rulings could arrive within 6 to 18 months. The technology that reads your brain without permission doesn't announce itself with warning signs or consent forms. It operates in the gap between what you know is being watched and what can actually be measured. The question every person now faces is simple but profound. Who should have access to the parts of yourself you haven't even consciously noticed yet? If you want to understand how this connects to the broader transformation of privacy in the digital age, watch our documentary, The Data They Collect While You Sleep, which explores the hidden infrastructure of behavioral monitoring. This investigation draws on peer-reviewed research, investigative journalism from established outlets, freedom of information requests, and public corporate documents. Technology capabilities described are documented in published research. Regulatory and legal information reflects status as of October 2024 and may change. For updates on developing stories, check our community tab and video descriptions, where we link to primary sources and ongoing coverage.